For many years, Joanie Lamb was known for being on Christian TV shows and showing everyone what looked like a perfect religious family. But her life has taken a shocking turn that has surprised the public because she was always on TV. Because of her strong faith and her work in ministry, Joni is now dealing with something very private. The public had always seen her and her husband as a team that could never be broken. But problems have been getting worse behind closed doors. Now the truth is finally coming out. Joanie Lamb's life has taken a sad and unexpected turn, and she recently shared her feelings after staying quiet for so long. The awful truth about what really happened behind the scenes is now out. How will this change her future? So listen carefully as we learn the surprising truth about her life-changing experiences and the marriage problems between Joanie Lamb and Doug Weiss. The rumors about Joanie Lamb and Doug Weiss started long before most people knew there were problems in their marriage. The rumors were quiet at first and only included small comments made by people who knew them. These people noticed tiny changes in how they acted together. But as time went on, the rumors got louder. People saw that they seemed tense when they appeared together in public. They also noticed that both of them had been strangely quiet on social media for a long time. Getting married had felt like a dream come true. After Marcus Lamb died, Joni had fallen in love with Doug Weiss. Doug was a famous Christian counselor, and their relationship was shown as proof of new healing, faith, and hope. But there were cracks behind the scenes that had started to grow. Fans said it was normal because every marriage has good times and bad times. But as time passed, people who knew them said Doug was struggling with the pressure of being in the spotlight. Doug had spent years working as a well-known counselor who helps couples fix their difficult relationships. But stepping into the world of Christian television was completely different. Being Joanie Lamb's husband meant that everything he did was watched closely. His past was always being looked at, and any mistake he made could become big news. Awesome. People said there was a lot of pressure, and it was starting to hurt his relationship with Joni. But even more shocking, there were reports that Doug was facing legal problems. Even though nothing was proven, rumors said there were money problems from his past life catching up with him. Some said it was because of his counseling practice and that he had been involved in court cases and business fights. Others said his name had come up in ongoing investigations. Nobody knew for sure. But the fact that these rumors were even going around made people worried. Did Joni know about this before they got married? Or had she just found out something that made her question everything? Another idea that became popular was that she and Doug had serious disagreements about the future of their ministry work. Some reports said Doug had his own ideas about how things should be run, and these differences had caused a lot of fighting. Between them, some even guessed that Doug might have wanted a bigger role in the network. But Joni had been hesitant about any big changes, and this may have been the breaking point in their marriage, even though the public got no answers. Every week that passed, more people began to wonder what really happened. Fans who had once believed that Joni and Doug's marriage was strong were now full of doubt. They questioned whether their relationship was falling apart behind closed doors or if Doug had something to hide. Most importantly, how long had these problems been going on? The rumors were made worse by the silence from Joni and Doug. Neither of them talked directly about the gossip, which made people think there was more to the story. Some members of the public had even more questions after learning that Joni and Doug had been living apart for some time. It wasn't clear exactly when this had started, but people who knew them said Joni had been focusing only on her ministry and avoiding questions about her private life. If this were true, it meant that their marriage had been in trouble a lot longer than anyone had realized. This left fans feeling disappointed about their love story. They felt tricked and confused about how their picture-perfect marriage had become a relationship full of separation and unresolved problems. Were they simply growing apart, Or was there something much more serious happening in the background? The truth was still unclear at this point, but one thing was certain. Something was wrong between Doug and Joanie Lamb Weiss. The moment was coming when the reality of the situation would finally come out. What he would do after sending you a sexual text message. I don't want to mention the things that we talked about. I don't tell anyone that we have conversations about sex, but he never had any before. He never said anything inappropriate to me, and we didn't have sex before we got married. He was well known for having good morals. So this was just sexual talk when Joni told me about those things that are bringing them down again. She was telling me about parts of the book that he was excited when I sent you, but I wasn't. I'm not sure how to deal with it, so I don't talk about it. We talked about sex with people for about 2 conversations, but he never sent me a text or said anything inappropriate. He's known for having good morals. So when she starts talking about it with me, I'm keeping that to myself because I'm starting to get worried and my body is starting to act weird. That's when I get scared. For example, a panic attack started to happen when she read this to me. And Rachel was on the other side. You know what's happening, but I won't tell you. Tell them that when Jimmy comes in, she showed the picture of her and him to our 6th meeting with Jimmy Evans. I called Jimmy privately because I don't want to say bad things about her or talk about that. I called Jimmy the day before the meeting, alone, away from her and the other people. And I said, hey, this is something I find hard to understand, and he will tell you this is true. Can you please help me understand this? Is this okay? After a divorce, life can be painful, shocking, and public. The Christian community was surprised to learn about Joanie Lamb and Doug Weiss's divorce. This happened just a few months after they had seemed like a strong and loving couple, showing proof of love after loss. Now people were being careful, and the perfect image had fallen apart, leaving unanswered questions behind. For Joni, the divorce was not just the end of a marriage. It was a future that had gone wrong. She had stood before millions of people because she believed in love being shared by others. She thought that God had given her a second chance for happiness after Marcus Lamb died. But now she had to face the reality that what she thought would last forever had ended much earlier than she expected. In private, Joni was overwhelmed with emotion. She had spent years showing herself as a woman of strong faith. But now she was dealing with a very private matter in the most public way possible. Every part of her life was being examined and questioned, and everything she said was met with gossip. She wanted to grieve quietly, but there was no way to keep the public's attention away from her. Doug had his own problems too. He had built a reputation as a marriage counselor, but now he couldn't even save his own marriage. His credibility was being questioned, and the responses from people were mixed. Joni's kids, who had accepted Doug into their family, were now struggling. They were trying to understand what had happened. Now they had supported their mother's choice to get married again, believing it was a blessing after Marcus died. Now they felt protective of her and wanted to keep her safe from the judgment and criticism coming from every direction. They saw how much pain she was in, and they hated that she had to go through another heartbreak with so much public attention. Doug's friends were also divided on some issues. Some people said he had been unfairly judged, claiming that marriages end for many reasons, and that it was none of anyone's business what had really happened between Joni and him. The media quickly covered the issue, with several Christian publications taking a caring approach and offering prayers and encouraging words for both Doug and Joni. Other sources were less forgiving, with headlines that guessed about why things had gone wrong. Some suggested that over time, the public's attention slowly moved away from the immediate shock of the divorce to the inevitable question of what would happen next. Would Joni get married again? Would Doug leave public ministry? Would either of them ever talk about the complete truth about their breakup? Nobody knew the answers. But one thing was certain: This chapter of their lives had ended, and whatever happened next would be watched by millions of people. Will Doug Weiss go to prison because of legal trouble? As if the divorce wasn't shocking enough, rumors started, spreading that Doug Weiss might face serious legal problems that could result in prison time. At first, it sounded like just another crazy conspiracy theory made bigger by social media and gossip websites. The first sign of trouble came when Doug started to pull away from the public eye. He had been very active in talking about his counseling work for many years, giving speeches at conferences and appearing on Christian television and social media. But his public presence suddenly decreased, and invitations to events that he had already agreed to attend were canceled or mysteriously rescheduled. This only made people more suspicious that he was hiding something. An insider report later claimed that Doug had been under investigation for financial wrongdoing related to his counseling work. Some sources said problems had been found in his business transactions that were now being looked at by lawyers. Others claimed that he had been in fights with former clients, some of whom had reportedly filed lawsuits against him, even though no official charges had been proven. The rumor that Doug was in legal trouble was enough to send shockwaves through the Christian community. Joanie Lamb had already had to deal with the terrible reality of her second marriage failing, but now she was forced to see her ex-husband's name appear in possible legal disputes. People around her said she was completely shocked. After building her entire life on faith, honesty, and the belief that God's plan guided her path, now she was left wondering whether she had been fooled or had trusted someone who wasn't who he claimed to be. The idea behind this made her sick. She had always been careful about protecting her reputation and how easily the network could fall apart because of a scandal. She and Marcus had decided that she needed to be careful, knowing that some of the attention could be aimed at her even. She had done nothing wrong. Some media sources were already wondering how much Joni knew before the divorce, asking if she had learned something new that led her to leave Doug earlier, or whether she had been forced to leave to protect herself and her network. The number of questions kept growing, and she didn't have clear answers. Meanwhile, Doug was dealing with both a personal and legal crisis. Legal experts wondered what might happen if there really was financial wrongdoing involved. They suggested that an investigation into his businesses might be carried out, possibly leading to criminal charges if he had broken any laws related to client privacy or stolen money. The accusations made him angry. People close to him felt that others were trying to destroy his reputation by using the divorce controversy to stir up even more trouble. He had spent decades building his reputation in Christian counseling, and now everything he had worked for was in danger. In the court of public opinion, being accused of wrongdoing was often enough to destroy a person's career. Even without proof, Doug's supporters stood by him, claiming that the accusations were just a deliberate attempt to hurt him. They thought that enemies in the industry were using the divorce as a chance to further damage his reputation and get rid of him. But not everyone was sure, and some of his loyal fans began to wonder whether there really was more to the story. After all, the source of these rumors wasn't just one place. Instead, reports came from many different sources, all suggesting there was a problem. As the weeks went by, tension increased. Even though there was no official confirmation of the accusations, the rumors were enough on their own to damage Doug's reputation. Churches that had previously asked him to speak quietly stepped back to see how things would turn out before associating their names with him again. He was now appearing in Christian media in a way that hadn't happened before, not as a respected counselor, but as someone who might have been part of a controversy. As for Joni, what could she say? She had spoken before about the pain caused by the divorce, but this was something completely different. Some reports said she was told to stay quiet to keep herself and her network safe, while others claimed she was still trying to process everything and figure out how things had gotten out of hand so quickly. If Doug was really guilty of something, what would it mean? Would people see Joni as a victim? Or would they ask questions about her choice to marry him in the first place? If he was innocent, could she possibly undo the damage that was already done? One thing was certain. The legal storm had not passed yet, and it had the potential to change everything even more. Rumors and controversies involving Joanie Lamb's marriage have been a topic of fascination for the public. Ever since Joanie Lamb announced her marriage to Doug Weiss, their story seemed perfect. A woman who had dedicated her life to faith and service was starting a fresh chapter after her first husband's tragic death. It was a tale that seemed almost divinely planned. But as time went on, the fairy tale started to fall apart. What had once been a story of love and healing was soon covered in whispers, rumors, and outright scandal, long before the news of their divorce was made public. Rumors were going around that Joanie and Doug's marriage was weaker than it first appeared. The gossip started when people noticed that Doug wasn't showing up with Joanie as often as expected for public events. At one point, they were seen holding hands, and then suddenly they were appearing alone. At first, people thought their busy schedules were to blame since Joanie had her network to run and Doug had his own counseling ministry. But over time, it became harder to ignore the fact that something was wrong. Among the first controversies to come up was the claim that Joanie's children had never completely supported the marriage. According to some sources, there had been conflict from the beginning. While Joanie was eager to move on and find joy again, her children were said to be more careful. They had personally lived through their parents' life together and thought nobody could ever replace Marcus Lamb. Some insiders even suggested that Joanie's choice to get married again so soon after Marcus died had caused conflict in the family. There were rumors that private fights had happened behind closed doors. Even though the family always showed a united front in public, the cracks were already starting to show. Even more shocking were rumors that Doug Weiss had personal secrets that he had hidden, even though Doug had been considered a respected counselor. Some doubters began to question his honesty, especially regarding his financial dealings and even the truthfulness of some of his professional claims. Some people guessed that Joanie had been so excited to start a new chapter in her life that she had ignored warning signs. But others believed she had simply trusted too much in someone who didn't turn out to be who he appeared to be when it came to both their private and public careers. There were also problems. Joanie had built her empire over decades alongside her network. Doug was used to running his own ministry with little outside influence. Reports said that Doug had wanted a more important role in Joanie's network, but Joanie was hesitant. Some accounts said Doug had expected to be more involved in making decisions, while others suggested that Joanie felt pressured to include him in a system that had existed long before he came along. Their different views on ministry leadership and the balance between personal and professional lives resulted in many disagreements behind closed doors. According to the most serious rumor, Joanie had learned something about Doug that meant she had no choice but to end their marriage. Some guessed that this had something to do with the legal troubles he had been facing. Of course, the media covered every possible theory. Several outlets showed Joanie as a grieving widow who had been caught off guard by betrayal, while others suggested that she had rushed into the marriage too quickly and was now dealing with the consequences. Some even claimed that the whole partnership had been more of a publicity stunt than a true love story, where both people benefited from the combination. Other people believed there was something more personal involved, with theories ranging from dishonest financial practices to personal betrayals. While there were no clear answers, everyone agreed that Joanie had left the marriage because of something serious, and she wasn't looking back.